Most people would probably recognise this as sheet music, even if they don't know what this arrangement of lines and dots actually means. But not many people would recognise this, or even this. But all these things are forms of what is called music notation, techniques to try and capture musical sounds and ideas down on paper. But we haven't always had music notation. For a very long time, music was passed around from person to person, exactly in the same way you might tell someone a good joke or a story that you'd heard. I think this is absolutely the best way to pass music around, because you can play it to me and show me every single detail about the music. There are lots of music cultures around the world where this is still the dominant method of passing music around, something we call an oral tradition. In Indian classical music, for example, music is passed down from generation to generation. But say I came up with a great idea for some music and I wanted to pass it around more widely. It is going to take me a long time to teach lots of people, and it might even take a few attempts, because they're not going to remember it all the first time. Imagine too that I wanted to send some music over to Sal in California for him to play. That is a long way to travel just to give a music lesson. Also, when music starts to get more complicated with multiple parts at once, then it becomes hard to remember these arrangements without some form of notation. These are the problems that music notation tries to solve. And don't forget that it comes from a time when we had no recording, so people couldn't just go into a recording studio to preserve their musical ideas. All music notation tries to capture the musical elements that we've spoken about so far, like beat, rhythm, melody, and harmony. And while we're looking at all of these different methods, it's important to remember that there isn't a right or wrong way, or even a best way to notate music. So how did standard Western music notation, of the type that we're looking at here, first come about? This style of music is called Gregorian chant, and it was used in the European Catholic Church as a part of daily Mass services. There are some churches in Europe and elsewhere where you can still hear this type of music. As you can hear, the music is very simple, often comprising of a single melody line that is sung by all the performers. For most people who were involved in the performance of this music in the Middle Ages, it was still an oral tradition. They would have learnt these melodies by listening to them being sung by someone who knew them already. But over time, techniques were developed to write down the different simple melodies that were used to mark the different events on the religious calendar. This is the first time we see the use of a staff or stave and notes to write down these chant melodies. Every mark on the staff represents a pitch to be sung in the chant. Over the centuries that followed, music styles began to change, and so the styles of notation being used had to change to keep up. The system quickly developed to allow rhythm, harmony, and other musical features to be written down. Let's have a look at this in a little more detail, starting with the staff. The staff contains 5 lines, producing a grid that will contain the notes. Each line and space on the staff represents a different note name. Now, of course, there are far more notes than we can fit onto the staff, and that is why we use something called a clef to tell us which notes this staff represents. In this example, we'll be using a treble clef, which is normally the notes that are played by, say, the right hand on the piano, or sung by a soprano or an alto, so generally higher notes. So it is where notes appear in these lines and spaces on the staff that give us information about which of the note pitches are being used in the music. The other information that we need to know is how long each note lasts for. We can tell this information by the way the note looks. If the note has a filled-in note head and a stem, this note will last for 1 beat. If it has a stem but the note head isn't filled in, then this note lasts for 2 beats. If the note head isn't filled in and there's no stem attached, This tells us that this note is to last for 4 beats. There are obviously lots more types of notes that we'll come to in the future, but for the moment let's have a look at all of this in action in a simple piece of music. This is a simple melody that I think you'll know, and we can see from the music that it begins on the note G, jumps up to a D, and then works its way down again to G. Other markings in the music give me other information about how I should perform this melody. Andante is an Italian term that means at a walking pace. This is giving me information about how fast I should play the music. This instruction here tells me that I need to play this music quite loud. Mezzo forte is Italian for quite loud. Finally, these symbols tell me that when I reach the end of this melody, I should play louder and slow down the tempo. So as you can see, Western music notation is a very powerful tool for capturing and writing down musical sounds. But it's not the only way we can do this, and so we'll be looking at some other techniques in the next video.